sitting up here on stage with him is John Riccitiello, who's he's a famous guy in the industry. And I think we're going to have a fireside chat today in which we find out a lot more about him. So with that, I'm going to hand over the microphone to Mr. GAUDIOSI, and we can get started.
Thank you very much. So John, I'd like to start by getting your thoughts on the industry today. It seems like there are a few big winners in mobile, like Supercell, Gung Ho, King, EA, and Kabam, and everyone else seems to be trying to chase them. How do you see this evolving over the next year?
First off, does this thing work? Mic works? Mic doesn't work.
Oh, the mic doesn't work.
So I can speak really loudly, if that helps.
I can also sit closer and just hand them this back and forth.
Now it'll work.
Now does it work? No. How's that? There we go. So, like any form of media, there's players at the top of the charts, and you name the 5 that are the leading players globally today. One of the things that I've found, frankly shocking, is how long titles stay in the top 50. Whether it's Clash of Clans or you can name them, Dragon Veil, or somebody's poker game, or the Candy Crush. They're holding up 100, 200, 300 days. What I find fascinating is a couple of things. The first observation is, with the rarest of exceptions, no one's got more than 2 games in the top 50. It's 1, it's 2, and EA might have a few more than that, but it's not a huge number of games in the top 50. Second thing that I'm noticing is that there's almost nobody that's ever put up a mobile game that lasts longer than a year in the top 50, and secondly, no one's sequeled where the second game's bigger than the first. What that leads me to believe is they're either going to get lucky twice, or they're going to have to figure out an answer that I think is vitally important for the health of the mobile business long term, which is simply this: they need to build brands. Will Clash of Clans be with us in 25 years? This is Madden's 25th anniversary. Will Candy Crush be around next summer, through the fabled IPO, and still be, doing a couple $1 million a day, or not? Will they figure out how to do a 2.0? I see precious little going on right now in mobile to suggest people are building multi-year franchises or multi-year brands. Every form of media births some great brands. Digital animation brought us all the great titles from Pixar. Original animation brought us all the great brands like Mickey Mouse from Disney. Radio brought us CBS. Console gaming brought us, EA, Nintendo, Activision, and the brands like, Call of Duty and Mario. What are going to be the great brands that the mobile players bring to fore? I think we see them now, but right now, at least in my judgment, you sort of stop paying for a game or playing a game when you're ready to throw your iPhone or your Android device through a window with frustration. You've been lifetime optimized so well that it can get pretty darn frustrating. So I'm waiting to see people figure out how to do that 2.0. So right now, I think you've got 5 super talented companies. Others are going to challenge it. And the big question for whether they stay at the top is whether they can either get lucky again, which I wouldn't bet on over and over again. Maybe 1 or 2 of them will get lucky again. It's whether they can take their brands and make them sustain multiple years where consumers are familiar with the brand, they want to see it again, whether it's a 2.0 or a slightly different name, they're expecting consistency on intellectual property, consistency on some of the gameplay mechanics, and fundamental improvement, newness, something different that'll bring them back over and over again.
When you look at the industry today, the top 50 titles seem to garner the vast majority of revenue in mobile. Will this trend continue?
Yeah, I think this is exactly the opposite of the first question. So one of the things that, if you actually do the math, position number 1 is essentially $1 billion business. Position number 50 is about a $10 million business, and it's a pretty fast drop as you work from 1 to 50. The first thing that's going to happen is mobile's growing rapidly. We will see $2 billion brands at the top of the charts, a lot like console today. What's going to be fascinating is to recognize that all the increase in resources going into gaming, I would bet that the 50th position will remain something close to a $10 million business. So after you finish building the game, supporting a live team, paying for installs, and all the other things you do, the bottom of the top 50 chart is probably going to be pretty close to break even. In almost every form of media, we're seeing a flight towards the top. The top movies get a much higher share of movie-going dollar than ever before. Top television programs garner a higher market share. Whether it's a World Cup or the Super Bowl, they're getting record performances, and anything else is getting crushed. So my belief is the top 50 is where it's at, and it's going to be cutthroat. And right now we're seeing a lot of Me Too's. People are saying, well, I'm going to make puzzles and dragons that make the circle into a diamond. Or I'm going to take, Bejeweled and turn jewels into some other form of fruit. Or I'm going to take and mess around with, wouldn't Clash of Clans be really cool if they weren't sort of Viking-ish and they were like, I don't know, space invaders. That level of innovation isn't going to work from this point forward. There's maybe a couple more shakes at that. Fundamental innovation is going to drive it. But realistically, the top 50 is going to be hard to crack, and that's going to be where all the resources are. So it's going to be a go big or stay home market pretty quickly and stay that way.
And given that, is there a role for a scale publisher today in mobile?
So actually, it's interesting. There was an announcement today, or I guess last night, from Facebook about becoming a publisher in mobile. I think a lot of people can misunderstand what publishing is, what it is. For good or for bad, I've had the pleasure of publishing about $50 billion worth of games, and people have a conjuring in their own mind what publishers are. Publishers are actually pretty simple businesses. They do three things. They provide capital to developers or content creators. They don't always provide capital, but providing capital is a key and valuable thing in the creation of content. That's what Hollywood studios do, and that's what big game publishers have done historically in console and PC. The second thing they do is they turn content into money. They are the point of transaction. Back in the retail days, they had 30,000 points of retail distribution, aggressive merchandising, budgets for television advertising. Today, and I'm going to come back to that in a second, is there anybody out there operating as a publisher that actually converts content into money for the creator of the content? And then the last thing they do is they provide an editorial service. In other words, they use some level of judgment based on past history as to what might work and may not work. Part of that is just the allocation of the dollars, but sometimes it's coaching or advice as to what might be more successful or not successful. Both ends of the spectrum, if you will, the capital and the editing are much the same. If you were to imagine yourself a publisher and interacting with a developer, you can provide capital and you can choose where to apply it, what advice to give. I think this center section around turning content into money is a much more amorphous concept in a digital world. There's lots of players out there providing analytics, ad place marketplaces, what Facebook hopes to provide in terms of connecting users. But it doesn't actually convert it into meaningful revenue unless you have a product that generates daily revenue, that does that whole lifetime value thing, but it retains the consumer. A publisher cannot do that for a developer. A developer's got to create a product that the user wants to come back and play every day. And so I do believe that there will be people posing as publishers, and some people will be doing a lot of publishing value add. But in terms of being entirely responsible for converting content into revenue, I don't think that's going to exist in the same way. I think a developer needs to be involved in a very significant way in that process. Now, maybe somebody will funnel users to them, but nobody else other than the developer can do the rest of the job, that can make the product sticky, to make the product one that people want to pay to play. And so I think there's going to be a different dividing line. I don't know if the word publisher will be the best word to describe it. There will be people occupying and adding value in that equation, but the full publisher concept seems to be less applicable here than we might otherwise want to imagine.
And speaking of those added value, what opportunities are there today for mobile players doing ad marketplaces, analytics, and game engines?
So I'm going to jump through that question to an observation. If you look at the marketplace for stocks, Apple and Google, since the advent of Android and the advent of iOS, these companies between them have added about $350 billion worth of market cap. So I would argue that at least half, if not 2/3 of that, is directly a result of the mobile and tablet ecosystems they've created. So $300 billion in market cap. Now, all of you have heard the story or heard the old saw that, content is king. Well, Apple and Google aren't creating content. They've created a distribution platform for the content many of you guys create. And they've garnered $300 billion in value in doing so. The best I can come up with, looking at the entire mobile ecosystem, games are 70%, 75% of all of the monetization on iOS and Android. The best I can come up with is there might be 20 to $25 billion worth of shareholder value having been created on the other side of the equation, the side of the equation that is content. So arguably it's 10 to 1. 10 times more value has been created by the platform creator than has been created by the content that goes over that. That wasn't the case in console, it wasn't the case in PC, it's absolutely the case in mobile today. And I do think smart players in that middle layer that will help developers monetize better, more rapidly, with more knowledge about their games, is the key to righting the ship. There should be $100 billion, $200 billion, $300 billion worth of value on the other side of the equation. It all won't go to games, but a big chunk of it needs to go to games. In other words, as content developers and this content is king, that's a joke right now. Right now, distribution is king. That's where the money's being made. That's where the value is being created. I think we can right that over time, and we're going to want to see these players in the middle be successful, because the alternative is all that analytics, all that other stuff will be entirely resident on iOS and Android, and that's a world where $400 billion of the value gets created by the distributor and very little left over for the content creator. So at least from my vantage point, there's a lot of value being added on everybody from say a Unity on the engine side, through the ad marketplaces like Playhaven and Chartboost, and the guys that do analytics in the middle, Contingent, many other companies. There's a lot of value being added there, and that needs to, if you will, liberate the equity value that Apple and Google have sopped up and bring some of that more effectively to content developers.
What do you think the mobile industry can learn from console gaming?
Well, first off, mobile's growing at about an infinitely better rate right now than console, so I'll be careful with this one. But I've visited with many mobile developers, and during the time I was at EA and the time since I left EA about 4 months ago. And I think one thing I've heard over and over and over again is, we're a mobile developer, we're a mobile content creator, but we're going to bring console level graphics to the mobile experience, and that's going to make us different and better, and we're trying to hire people to do that. I think that's a mistake. If I go back to the time I was launching console and PC games, investing in better graphics without figuring out what incremental or better or differentiated gameplay goes with those graphics, in other words, reward the user, reward the gamer with a better game, not just a prettier game, is a road to ruin. Prettier games cost more to make. Better games satisfies consumers better. Go back to sort of 97, 98, a lot of game genres, RTS in particular, but some of the strategy games all went to 3D, doubling and tripling their development costs, and they didn't fundamentally alter the gameplay. Revenue remained about the same. Development costs tripled, and everybody in the the flight simulation business, the Janes type things, and a few other guys in other businesses, RTS, et cetera, they got hurt really badly. The companies that figured out how 3D would enable entirely new gameplay, these guys did really well. So action adventure games, they weren't really possible with sprites and isometric 2D type game experiences. Getting those to 3D, sports games did the same thing. Fundamentally new game experiences. So if I would have come up with one bit of advice, as you're looking at the more powerful CPUs and GPUs inside the phones and tablets, and you say that's an opportunity to create something that's better looking, think more about how that creates the opportunity to build an experience you've not seen before, that is a different kind of gameplay. Some of it will be real-time gameplay mechanics, but what do you unlock if you go to 3D, which is a lot more expensive to produce? What gameplay mechanic wasn't possible before or was fundamentally sub-optimized before? If you can answer that question, the investment's worth it. If you can't answer that question, like the console folks before you, I think all you'll find is you've spent more money to generate the same revenue, and eventually that doesn't work very well.
If we were to flip that, what can the console industry learn from what's going on in the mobile industry?
I'll kind of give you 2.5 answers to that. The first thing is that I spent a decade preaching simplicity and why we needed to make console games and PC games more accessible. And I could say that we made this much progress, and that looks like a lot. The progress we needed to make was a mile long. And the console guys with some exceptions, spent way too much time looking to the guy that writes the code, the marketing guy that plays the game as the target audience, and not recognizing that we were serving 200 million people in a world of 2 billion potential gamers. And what got in the way was complexity. Now, complexity and depth aren't the same thing. So if you play, I don't know, I just finished BioShock Infinite a couple weeks ago. That's a profoundly simple game to play, but it's a profoundly deep game. And so it's done very, very well. My point is that if we could learn anything from console and PC looking at mobile, is radical simplification. Make it easy to get into. I don't mean give up the depth, but make it simpler to access and get inside. There's a lot of things I could say about microtransaction business models. I would start by saying, though, that I don't think microtransaction is going to be the only prevailing model going forward. It's clearly the dominant model in mobile right now. But remember, that's a game design question. So in every mobile game that uses microtransactions as a business model, they're also using microtransactions as a gameplay mechanic. You are managing resources as part of the game design. And I don't know that that's the best business model for everything. I don't know that I want to play a story-based game where I'm paying as I go, as much as I do other types of games where I love to pay as I go. So I would say that the first thing is console, PC guys, look at what mobile has done to make games accessible, but don't mimic the business model to the point of slavery, because it's not going to be the only business model out there. The trends look like it, but it's not going to end up that way.
When you look at casual gaming today, how different is the Facebook casual gaming experience to the mobile gaming experience?
Well, let me start by saying I'm not entirely sure what a Facebook gaming experience really is. I play games on PC, I play games on my television through a console, I play games on touch devices, iPad, and my Android phone. Each of those are very different. I think the most profound shift and driver of mobile was touchscreens. Touchscreens changed an enormous number of things, and they aided that simplicity I was talking about. I think it's probably the biggest innovation in gaming since the first, since Atari, was giving consumer touch. The ability to interact with a product in an intuitive way and getting rid of the complexity of a controller. A huge, huge thing. And there's been a staggering number of great franchises built on that concept of new types of interface. And some very smart companies are taking games that used to be on controlled with controllers and keyboards, and they really thought that through. How to simplify and use the benefits of the touchscreen to yield a brand new experience. Companies that really thought that through have done very, very well. And all you need to do is look at the top of the mobile charts to see who those companies are. PC games, look, that's my number one platform for me personally. I love the added keyboard and the mouse and the rest of it, and I love the rich games that are played there. But like one of San Francisco's company, Kixeye, with their Vega Conflict product, to me that's a PC game. It plays like a PC game. It's a great PC game. I got my, I've got all the assets that I'm building on one side and I'm going to war on the other. It's a great PC game. I don't know that it actually gets a lot from Facebook. So at least from my perspective, there's touch-based mobile and tablet games. There's games that are best played on a PC, and then there's games that work really, really well on a console. And games will go from device to device. I'm a Minecraft player, but I've never actually played it on a console. I probably should. I just read it made it to the top of the charts in the UK, which means something. So I'm certainly missing something here. But the question is, what does Facebook add in the middle to that? Historically, what they've added is a friends list and content discovery. Now with Facebook Connect, we're all using their friends list systems, whether we're on the platform or not. And right now they've announced their new mobile platform and what they're going to try to do to support this publisher. I think they need to do a better job of helping all of us understand what their value add is. What makes them, why is it better than a PC game to get it through Facebook? Look, they're blowing the numbers out. I'm sure they're going to answer the question really well. But at least to me, it's touch, PC, and console. The underlying hardware is the enabler for the type of game experience that we can get. It's very different to play a PC game when the screen's 2 feet in front of you versus the TV where it's 15 feet in front of you. Screen resolution changes, controllers change, and those are the three primary ways at least I look at it.
I think we have time for one more. I wanted to get your thoughts on how you see second screen gaming impacting the business as we move forward with mobile.
So I'm now going to touch on an area that we should all collectively get a bottle of wine or a beer, because where I'm about to go is an area where no one really knows the answer, and it's great to pontificate. And at least on the questions that I've been asked so far, I feel like I've got some advantage in a little bit of knowledge and I can say something. On this one, I don't really know. I do know that I sit on my couch at home and I'm running Outlook over here on a PC, looking at my email. I'm playing a console game up on the TV, and I might be playing Candy Crush on my tablet. Like I'm using multiple screens all the time. And I think most of us are doing that in many different ways. I have seen some absolutely stupendous experiences with dual screen, with console games where you're using a tablet or a phone as a secondary data input and or just information. Dual screen Nintendo was the first innovator in that arena. But I think I wouldn't even know that we're scratching the surface as much as that we're waving our hand above a surface that we're yet to scratch, because the concept of using the best screen in your house, the big TV, with a tablet or a phone as a secondary input device or a data device or a touch device or a communication device is brilliant. Now, some of us would argue that that all we'll ever need is a tablet or a phone, use HDMI wireless out into your television set, and your screen will be here and your controller will be here. That's one example. Personally, I've always found RTS on console impossible to play because I need a second screen to figure it out. And so one of the reasons Command & Conquer, in my view, didn't do as well on console as it did on PC, or StarCraft didn't do as well on console as PC, is because you needed another data set. And I would love to have my battling going over here, but move my troops over here as a gameplay idea. But again, I'm so far away with that simple idea of the many things we're going to see. The television is going to be used for mobile games going forward. I can't tell you I know the exact mechanic. I can tell you that dual screen will be a really, really big idea when you figure out a gameplay experience that is better because you're using both.
Cool. Thank you very much. That should be everything for this one.